This is the Dave Pamah Show, a global breakdown of how public systems actually work under pressure and why the same failures show up in different places around the world. I'm Dave Pamah, a retired firefighter, and this is where lived experience meets system reality. I'm deeply concerned by reports of a train collision near Bedford, which is not far from where I stay in the UK. Originally from London, of course, where I worked as a firefighter in London Fire Brigade. Now, I know many people locally will be worried, and my thoughts are with everyone involved, their loved ones and the emergency services reporting at the scene. And as we now know, a train driver has tragically lost his life, with dozens of people seriously injured. Whenever an incident like this happens, the headline understandably focuses on collision itself, the impact, the injuries, the disruptions, the investigation. But today, I want to talk about something deeper, because rail crashes are never just transport stories. They're stories about systems. They're stories about pressure. They're stories about what happens when ordinary people suddenly find themselves in extraordinary circumstances. And they're stories about how public services respond when everything changes in a matter of seconds. That's what we're going to break down today. Not as a news report, not as a political commentary, but through the lens of lived experience and system reality. Because once you've worked on major incidents, you never look at these events the same way again. So, the reports from Bedford described two trains colliding during the evening of the rush hour period. Passengers described hearing a boom. Others spoke of almighty impact, objects flying through carriages, people screaming, people injured, people confused, people trying to understand what has just happened. What many people don't realise is that major incidents often begin with complete uncertainty. The public sees the finished story. Emergency services arrive at the beginning of the story. Nobody immediately knows how many casualties there are. Nobody knows how severe the injuries might be. Nobody knows whether there is a fire, whether there is structural damage, whether there is a hazardous material involved, or whether another collision could happen. The first few minutes are often a race to understand reality itself. And that uncertainty is one of the hardest parts of emergency response. Most people will see images from the scene. They'll hear casualty figures. They'll hear about delays and disruptions. But there is a hidden reality behind every major incident. As soon as the emergency call comes in, multiple systems begin moving at the same time. Fire and rescue, police, ambulance, rail operators, control rooms, network infrastructure teams, incident commanders, hospitals, traffic management, government department, investigation teams. Dozens of organisations suddenly have to operate as one system. And that's incredibly difficult because under normal circumstances, they all have different responsibilities, different priorities, different procedures, different leadership structures. Yet, during a major incident, they must rapidly become one coordinated response. That doesn't happen automatically. It happens because people train for it. It happens because systems exist. And it happens because frontline workers step forward when needed. Listening to the reports from Bedford brought back memories from one of the most traumatic incidents in my firefighting career. The Ladbroke Grove rail disaster in October 1999, or also known as the Paddington train crash. In my book, Firefighting from Within, I describe arriving at that scene after what initially sounded like a routine railway fire. But as we approached, the reality became clear. Flames were punching high into the sky. Thick black smoke was visible from a distance. Diesel fuel had ignited. The entire scene was chaotic. To reach the incident, we had to scale a security fencing before gaining access to the crash site. Once we arrived, the scale of the devastation became apparent. There were injured passengers everywhere, people suffering severe burns, serious fractures, deep lacerations, traumatic injuries. Passengers helping strangers, complete strangers, risking their own safety to assist others. It's something I've never forgotten. In moments of disaster, you often see the very best of humanity. Headlines focus on tragedy, but responders see courage. They see kindness. They see ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that's something that deserves recognition. When discussions begin about investigations, signalling systems and safety procedures, it's important not to lose sight of the human reality. A train driver has died. Families have received life-changing news. Passengers who boarded a train expecting a routine journey may now carry physical and psychological scars for many years. Some injuries heal quickly, others don't. And some wounds aren't visible at all. One thing emergency responders understand is that incidents don't end when the scene is cleared. The impact continues long after the cameras leave. Families continue living with the consequences. Survivors continue living with the memories. Responders continue processing what they just experienced. And communities continue asking questions. Whenever a major transport incident occurs, people naturally want answers immediately. What happened? Who was responsible? Could it have been prevented? Those are reasonable questions. But investigations take time for a reason. Good investigations aren't about finding someone to blame as quickly as possible. They're about understanding the full chain of events. Because serious incidents rarely have a single cause. Instead, they often involve multiple layers, technical systems, communication systems, human factors, procedures, training, infrastructure, oversight, decision making. The goal is to understand how all of these layers interacted, and more importantly, how similar incidents can be prevented in future. Now let's zoom out, because this isn't just a Bedford story. This is a global story. Whether you're in the United Kingdom, the United States, India, Japan, Germany, Australia, Canada, or anywhere else in the world, the same pattern appears repeatedly. Modern societies depend on highly interconnected systems: transport, energy, communications, healthcare, emergency response, supply chains. Most of the time, these systems work remarkably well. Millions of journeys happen safely every day. Millions of people arrive where they need to be. But when something goes wrong, we suddenly realize how much we depend on systems we really think about. And that's why incidents like Bedford resonate far beyond the immediate area. People recognise these systems are part of everyday life. We all rely on them. One lesson I learned as a firefighter is that pressure reveals reality. Pressure doesn't create weakness. Pressure exposes them. The same principle applies to organisations. The same principle applies to public services. Same principle applies to infrastructure. When everything is running smoothly, weakness can remain hidden. But under pressure, weakness becomes visible. That's why major incidents matter. They reveal truths that ordinary days often conceal. They show what works, they show what doesn't, and they show where resilience exists, and they show where improvement is needed. So when we talk about systems, it's easy to imagine computers, procedures, and organisational charts. But systems ultimately are people. They're ultimately people. Train drivers, signal operators, control room staff, firefighters, paramedics, police officers, hospital workers, engineers, maintenance teams, investigators. Every major public service relies on individuals making decisions under pressure. And many of those individuals never receive public recognition. Most people will never know their names, yet society depends on them every day. That deserves respect. The emergency response will eventually end. The investigation will continue. Lessons will be identified. Recommendations will likely be made, and changes may follow. That's how mature safety systems work. Every incident becomes an opportunity to learn. Not because learning remains or removes tragedy, but because learning can prevent future tragedy. And that principle is universal. Every country that takes public safety seriously follows the same basic idea. Learn, adapt, improve, repeat. So as someone who has stood in the middle of major incidents, one thing stays with me above all else. Disasters remind us how connected we really are. A train driver goes to work expecting a normal shift. Passengers board expecting a natural, normal journey. Families expect loved ones home for dinner. And within moments, everything changes. That's why we should never take public systems for granted. Not because they're perfect, but because they carry enormous responsibility every single day. And when those systems come under pressure, thousands of people step forward to protect others. So today, my thoughts remain with everyone affected at the Bedford collision. The passengers, the families, the communities. And the emergency services and rail staff working through an incredibly difficult situation. Because behind every headline is a human story. And behind every major incident is a system under pressure. Understanding both matters. Because whether it's here in the UK or anywhere else in the world, these systems don't fail in isolation. They fail in patterns. And once you understand the patterns, you understand and start to see it everywhere. This is the Dave Pamah Show.